Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is dystopia treating you, folks? My cat's got a UTI. That's the microcosm. We don't have to talk about actual fascism or anything like that here in the intro. What's the point of talking about it? I said to Naomi on our other show, Couples Therapy, I was like, is this like in, 1920s, 1930s in Italy and Spain? Was everyone just like, what the fuck is going on? Kind of like how it feels now. So, let's leave it there, because what I really want to do is get in today's episode, because this is one of my favorite comics writers. This is Matt Fraction. And if you don't know who Matt is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Chicago, Eisner Award-winning comics writer Matt Fraction started out in comics writing for publishers like IDW in the early 2000s and broke into wider recognition with his 2006 series Casanova. This led to both more creator-owned work like Sex Criminals, Satellite Sam, and November, as well as stints on Marvel books like Uncanny X-Men, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, and a defining run on Hawkeye with David Aja. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Is it Aja? David, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Matt also works in television, and most recently, he was the co-creator, writer, and executive producer of the brand new Apple TV Plus series Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, which is out now. If you're downloading this the day it comes out, it should be out. I guess technically, no matter when you download this episode, it should be out. This is very exciting for me. I am a big fan of Matt's work. I remember reading Casanova back when it came out and falling in love with both his writing and the art. Honestly, pretty much everything he's written, I've enjoyed. I have to say, I'm not a huge Godzilla guy, but look, this show written by Matt, starring Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell, sounds like a winner to me. I'm excited to watch it. And Matt was such a cool person to talk to, very open. I mean, almost immediately we start talking about psychoanalysis, and then it just takes off from there. The internet, of course, the internet was terrible. Why would Spectrum cooperate? So I had to use, just as, I guess, a sound note. I don't know if anyone really cares, but I always like to just put it out there. I had to use Matt's backup audio, which has kind of like my Zoom audio on it, which I've cut out in probably about 98% of it, but there's a little bit of overlap. I just want to give you that warning. But yeah, we go from psychoanalysis to his childhood to getting sober and so much other stuff. It's really cool. I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, why not check out other episodes of the show? If this is your first time listening to Beginnings, I've been doing this for 14 years. I have talked to hundreds of television writers, comics writers, actors, performers, comedians, musicians. So there's a huge back catalog of people for you to sift through. What I like to do here, though, because it's been 14 years, what I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like. If you like my talk with Matt, maybe you will like my talk with other people from the world of comics, such as Matt's partner on Sex Criminals, Chip Zdarsky. He's been on the show. Kieran Gillen, Jim Starlin, Ryan North, Cy Spurrier, Jeff Lemire. This is just the last year or so. Or what about people from the world of Apple TV Plus, like Ron Moore, creator of Battlestar Galactica and For All Mankind. Dan Erickson, creator of Severance, and from Severance, Britt Lauer. So check out those episodes. Subscribe to the show. Leave a review if you have 10 or 30 seconds. You can find me on social media. Honestly, I'm mostly writing jokes on Blue Sky at this point. Although pictures of Naomi and the animals on Instagram, both of those things at Andy Beckerman. Coming up, I got a lot of cool talks. I just talked to Nina Anastasia. If you don't know who she is, brilliant musician, incredible life story. We talk all about it, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk to Matt. Therapy, so I'm all primed to talk about these things. You seem like a therapy person. Again, I am now taking the you that I think exists from your work.
Sure.
So I assume you're a therapy person, but I don't know if that's true.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Yeah.
How long have you been? How long are you still in therapy? How long were you?
It's interesting. I just wrapped up sort of my first kind of I'm not sure cycle of like psychoanalysis, like 4 to 5 days a week, every day. Like I sort of I'm just a little bit on the other side of that experience, which went on for 6 years. Which was incredible. And it's sort of, I don't quite know how to articulate the experience, but a lot of people talk about wanting to be resistant to therapy because they're worried that it'll somehow affect their creativity. I in fact found it to be an exploration of that an amplification of that creative process. I feel like I understand, if nothing else, who I am as a creator better than I could have ever hoped to, and I feel more creative and more in touch with all of that kind of energy and ability. And I found the opposite of the thing that everybody says that they're afraid to have happening. And now I don't have panic attacks anymore, so I got that going for me as well.
Okay, wait. Do you mind if I
let's get into it. Sure. Yeah, sure. Let's get into it.
First of all, this is. I don't know if I've known anyone that has actually done, Freudian psychotherapy. It's always like I do talk therapy, which is very I guess it's, an offshoot in some way, but it's not like the intense kind of, did you actually lie on a couch, that type of
Yeah, I did for a while. And then after the pandemic, I went back to just sitting in a chair. But yeah, no, I did the couch and all that stuff.
What prompted you in the first place? Actually, let me ask this. Were you just doing talk therapy before that? Was it nothing before that?
No, I had been in and out as sort of like the kind of person that would only take the car in when you would blow a gasket. I'd be in long enough to kind of get my stuff together and or so I thought, and then head back out. But I had a real bad time there for a bit and needed more than just a tune-up. And kind of committed to the process, and yeah, you're gonna have to ask me a lot of questions. I'm not entirely I'm not entirely sure how to talk about it. So, but yeah, no, I had a lot of undiagnosed stuff, and some real rough years. Lost my father, and a lot of our family, and kind of cancer went through like wildfire there for a minute, and had all kinds of stuff just kind of come to a head, and I, like I said, all these kind of undiagnosed things, and was having panic attacks and all this kind of like prolonged episodes of panic and anxiety and depression and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, I should be happier than I've ever been in my entire life. And I feel like I'm on fire all the time, and I don't want to move. So something's wrong, and it needs more than just an oil change. Right. So that kind of started it. And it frightened me, and sort of the only, I treated it like a creative endeavor, right? I treated it like, oh, this scares me, this worries me, I don't know how this is going to end, I don't know why I'm doing this. That's the thing I should go to, not to, sound like a podcast guy or whatever, but like the way, the obstacle is really the way. Like, what's the thing? I run towards the thing that scares you creatively, do the dangerous thing, and that's just how I work. And it has probably. It's certainly not a commercial instinct, right? but it's just kind of how I got to do it.
Well, okay, I want to go back to the psychotherapy stuff in a second, but with this kind of idea of like you have an idea, and you say you like what makes you, and I don't even know this for myself. Like, I have a bulletin board you can't see over there with like a bunch of
I'll take your word for it.
A bunch of. You know what? There. So you just so you know that I'm like being honest with you.
I got you.
But with a bunch of projects on it, and some in different forms. Like, some of them are just pitch docs, some of them I've sold already or whatever, right? And if you asked me, well, what they all just like, there's something in my head where I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and then I'll follow them. And as much as the interest goes, I will follow them out. And that's why some of them are just a card on a bulletin board, and some are just a pitch doc or something like that. Like, when you said like you run like something. Like what is the actual emotion when you have an idea that you really want to pursue? What is the actual emotion that it inspires or it pulls out of you?
I think there are emotions, but it's more of a, it's like it hypnotizes me. It'll be a thing I can't stop thinking about. It'll be a thing that, well, I've got 17 things I got to do today, but I'm just going to take half an hour to just to warm my fingers up for the day. And you know what I mean? It's that kind of, I don't know. It feels like there's like an infinite range top stove in my head, and there are infinite pots on it, all coming to boils at different points. And sometimes something's boiling and you're like, oh, that's the thing. And then, you explore it for a little while. I will explore it for a little while and will be able to sense, is this a meal? And then I know, okay, well, this is the thing I got to do, right? Like this is the thing I'm hungry for, and all the ingredients are here. So I don't necessarily know how it is. I don't know. There's an ineffable kind of a thing that clicks, and suddenly it's like, oh, this is the thing I got to do. And if it's, I have a lot of ideas, and I think ideas are really cheap. I think everybody has a lot of ideas. The trick is recognizing them, but then aside from recognizing them, it's then what do you do with them? And that's kind of the more important idea, right? And it's like, I have a lot of ideas, but if I can't figure out something interesting to do with it, it's kind of inert. That's what it's like, well, this could easily be a 6-issue comic book or whatever, but like, I'll be bored writing it. And if I'm bored writing it, you're going to be bored reading it. So let's not do that. Let's wait until I can find the thing that makes it interesting and difficult, right?
And then it just becomes a tweet or something like that.
I have index cards. I have a stack of index cards, and whenever something kind of flutters through that I don't have time for, but I know I want to come back, I just kind of jot it down, and maybe I'll come back like, oh right, I remember why I wrote that down. Maybe something occurs to me now that makes sense. The idea that became sex criminals. Like I don't know when I knew that was the thing that I was going to do for real, but I can look back and see that, oh, that had been cooking a really long time in ways that I kind of wasn't conscious of. Like I wasn't sitting down with all of those index cards, but it was just suddenly, it was like, oh, that's boiling. Of course it's boiling. It's ready to go. I know what this is,
Yeah, I think that's a good way of like describing kind of like, and I don't know, I mean, a lot of people I talk to on this show, and including myself, and also including my wife, who's a stand-up and a performer and a writer, is that like, there's just a thing that you are a compulsion. Like there's something in your brain, and it won't shut up until you kind of like vomit it onto a page, or for her on stage or whatever, right? Like that. And then you can kind of have a little bit of peace in your life for a moment.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of instinct to it. I think that's maybe the thing that, like I said, everybody has a lot of ideas, but that doesn't necessarily make you a writer or a artist or a performer, right? Like maybe that's it. Maybe it's just having that instinct of what to do with the thing is what makes that different,
I remember Opus Moresky, who is the head writer for Colbert.
He's an old friend of my wife's, weirdly enough.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. He was talking about like jokes being like Kleenex. He's like, you can just take one, it's just like that. You keep pulling it. They're not precious. And then it's like afterwards, it's what happens with them. But like the joke itself or the idea itself is just like, you got a box of them and you can just keep pulling them out.
If you do the thing of like, okay, write 30 punchlines. Well, I haven't seen a blank since, and if think 30, oh my God, what? No way. And then you get to like 1920, you're like, oh yeah, sure, 30's no problem.
Yeah.
And it's, The trick is knowing what to do with it, and then not being precious. It's Kleenex. Like I'm working as an adjunct professor at a comics writing class. Brian Michael Bendis teaches at Portland State, and the first day of class, I bought everybody the cheapest notebooks and the cheapest pens I could find. Gave them to everybody in the class, and was like, the magic ain't in the notebook, and the magic ain't in the pen. Right? Notebooks are cheap. This is where you go to suck. Right? This is where like artists have sketchbooks. There's a reason why they don't publish their sketchbooks. Or that are highly curated, right? Your notebook is a place, just go to suck. Like, write the bad version of the story. Write 100 bad versions of the story, right? Like, it's why pencils have erasers. Just figure it out on the page, right? It's ideas are cheap and easy. It's the execution that's the hard part, and that's the thing you gotta, like, I think you gotta work. That requires. That's what that, you know, that's what where mastery comes from, is not being precious with them and not being afraid to break it and start over.
So, okay, knowing this in terms of like how you think creatively, how did the idea of psychoanalysis then, how was that on the stove for a while until you finally were like, okay?
It really wasn't. It just, I just was really unwell. Like, it wasn't a thing I'd been noodling around on. I was just deeply, deeply unwell and kind of didn't even go looking for it. She loves to point this out, but like my therapist, like, was literally the first doctor I found anywhere near me, that was taking new patients. I got a call back from another person who couldn't see me for a while, and I immediately disliked on the phone. And then a couple of months into therapy, got a call from someone I had left a voicemail with. But like, literally, it was one of those things where, like, any port in a storm. It just so happened it was the perfect port for me. And as we'd been kind of meeting for a while, and she sort of proposed, like, this is what I think we should do. And I was like, okay, great. You know, I'm putting my faith entirely in you, and let's see what happens. And it was terrifying, right? I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what I was going to go through. It was really fucking hard. It was really intense. It was a huge commitment of time and money, but like emotional, like, it's not all fun, but it was revelatory and incredibly helpful in ways I still struggle to articulate clearly.
Yeah. At what point do you think you started to change as a person? Like, how far through the process?
I think very early, but in ways I didn't realize until later. But I, maybe a year or so, maybe a couple of years into it, year-ish, I stopped having nightmares. I had nightmares, I'd screaming, wake up, freak everybody out in the house out nightmares my entire life. And they stopped. Entirely. So anytime that helped when anytime I would be like, this isn't working, this is fucking bullshit, I'm wasting time, I'm wasting money, this is gonna go on forever, I'm a fucking mark. You know, all that kind of like things you do to convince yourself that, like, oh yeah, sure, like I should eat a healthy meal and get some rest and exercise, you know. But like, anytime I would get that voice would start trying to convince me to stop because it was hard and it was dangerous and I didn't want to do it anymore, I would like, yeah, you don't have nightmares anymore. Like, what? So that was something.
Yeah. Was there ever a fear, parentheses, for me when I started therapy, I was afraid of who I would be on the other side, that I would be I don't mean I was about to say a more well person. And I don't mean that and be like, well, I won't be able to write, but I just mean like, I'll be a different person and the old me will be dead. So that was my fear. And parenthesis, did you have any fears about who you would be on the other side of therapy? Or was it you were in such a crisis mode that you were like...
I was afraid on who I was on this side of therapy. I wanted to jump off of a building. I felt like I was on fire all of the time. I felt... I was in crisis. I'd give all of it up to have been able to be alive and not feel on fire anymore. Can't write anymore? Fine, I'll fucking work at a Starbucks. It didn't matter. Like I was at a desperate, kind of unwell place. And I would have given anything to not feel like that anymore. So if there was nothing, I had nothing to lose because I was about to lose everything.
Were you on meds at the time? Like what was actually like, or were they not working?
Well, no. It was kind of on and off, and I got to a point where I felt like, oh, I got this, and had gone off without consulting anyone, right? Which is just sort of supremely arrogant, stupid, as the, you know, that it was, and then when I started to experience this kind of panic episode, went back on meds, but rather than ramp up, I went back to what my old dosages were and also kind of misremembered, so it was like misdosing, and like I was all wrong. So it was like Oh, it's like a controlled burn. There's a forest fire. Then like, no, I'm just going to pour gasoline and napalm on it. Why isn't this working? So I had been on and off medicine, but not with any regularity. And now I've just kind of accepted I'm going to be on these the rest of my life.
Now, I'm not asking these questions, by the way, just to be prurient. I'm just curious about then through this process of kind of being unwell and then going through psychotherapy. Do you think the way that you approach creative work or the way you write or the things you're interested in have changed?
I mean, I think probably, but I think everything's changed in the way that like you regrow all of your skin every 7 years or whatever. Like I can't tell you what cells are new, but yeah, sure. Right. I think that's the journey. I think that's a danger is if I'm no different creatively now than I was 7 years ago, like that's stagnance, right? That's death. So I'm sure not in a way that I could consciously chart. But I can go back and look at what I was working on over the course of analysis from where it started to where it finished, and I can kind of chronologically put together. I can see in ways that probably nobody else really can what I was talking about, what I was thinking about, what I was looking at, what was happening in my life and how I was responding to it. I kind of feel like I kind of have to dream out loud or dream on paper. Or there's something about doing the work and then I can go back and look at it and see, oh, I was trying to figure this out. I was trying to figure that out. I don't know that it's, especially in something like comics, it's so kind of heavily encoded, especially like Western superhero comics with this kind of grammar. I don't know that anybody would understand, or it doesn't necessarily look like it, but I can look back and go like, I see what I was doing. I see what was happening.
Is therapy something that your family does, or was it new to you?
It was, I mean, I had been, like I said, I had kind of dipped in and out, my wife as well. But it was not in the culture in which I was raised at all.
Yeah, same for me. I come from Pennsylvania. You're from
all over. I was born in Chicago, but my parents are from my dad was born in Pennsylvania. My mom was born in Ohio, so that kind of Pennsylvania Dutch, German, Irish. Yeah, so It's very.
I blame that for so much because my parents are from New York originally, but then moved down to Pennsylvania to help take care of my grandmother and stayed there. And then I swear that my wife, like when my wife is from Harlem, and when she meets my friends from high school, she's like, you're all repressed in the same way. You're all like, and I blame the Pennsylvania Dutch. I blame that for being in the atmosphere of where I was raised.
And like, look, I'm an alcoholic and drug addict that's been in recovery. I knew that much about myself. Like, oh, that was their therapy. Like I'm not, and that was part of the thing, was starting to see not only how I felt, but who I was becoming against my will because I was mimicking behaviors. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, I don't want to be that person. I want to be that kind of parent. I don't want to be that kind of husband. And all this other stuff is kind of happening and da-da-da-da-da.
Were they ever expressive when you were growing up?
Yeah. Not like you mean.
Well, how do you mean it then?
I mean it like this. I mean it not in a way that I want to be as a parent or a person. I would much rather be forward facing with my. I don't want anybody to need a decoder book to figure out what I'm thinking or feeling. And just that alone, just talking like this is not something that would have happened. Just being able to be like, oh yeah, I'm in there. Like it would, just that kind of thing, just owning and embracing that. So, I just, not terrifically emotionally forward or available in that, and in the way that you're kind of, that I sense is kind of behind the question. And it wasn't, everybody was doing the best they could, right? Is that sort of with what they had, right? So, but I knew that I could do at least differently, if not better. So that was a big part of what started me on the road to a long-term therapeutic commitment.
Oh yeah. That wasn't supposed to be like an indictment of your parents necessarily.
No. I'm just not quite sure how to articulate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. My little pithy way of saying is that my parents could say "I love you," and we could also express anger, but like we couldn't have any deeper conversations. Like I knew I was loved, but we never discussed anything outside of anything deeper than that.
Right. Yeah. I think that feels about right.
When you were growing up, though, did you feel like you wanted that stuff, or were you were you satisfied in that kind of relationship with them?
I don't think I knew anything else. You know, it's sort of like discovering restaurants. Like, I don't have to hunt and gather for my food anymore. There's a place you can go and they bring it to you. Oh, fuck, but now there's this menu. I got to figure out what that is. How does this work? You know, it's not like I ever starved, but it was I don't know. I don't know. That's tricky.
Does this metaphor work maybe? So I'm Jewish, and so my parents we're Eastern European Jews. So shtetl food, like that, like a lot of like
stews, lots of stews, lots of stews.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like not seasoned very well, like maybe salt.
Right.
But there's no other real seasoning there. And then you go into the world and suddenly you're like, wait, chana masala?
Right.
Wait, what's this?
Yeah.
I can have smoked paprika on things? Oh my God.
Yeah, there's a very limited palate. Sure. Yeah. There was a limited emotional palate.
Yeah. So wait, you said you moved around a lot. Was that voluntary?
No, it was a function of, no, I was a kid. None of it was voluntary. But it was a function of my father's. Yeah. It was a function of my father's job. He worked in retail, and they just tend to move you around a lot. So I was in a school basically every year and a half, 2 years. I went to like 6 or 7 schools before I graduated high school. But yeah, we were never anywhere longer than like 2 years.
Did that turn you into an introverted person, or did you become extroverted so you could like fit in everywhere?
No, I'm an introverted extrovert. It's very performative. There's a psychic toll that sort of extroversion. You know, it's in my wife is an extroverted introvert, right? Like we go to comic conventions, and at the end of the day, she's completely energized and wired, and I'm completely wiped out.
Did you have? I mean, you're a little older than me, so this is all before the internet. And do you like keep friends as you go from school to school, or is it just like we're gone? These people that I just became friends with this year, I'll never see you again.
Yeah, right. Which is kind of another thing then to deal with once people in my family started dying. Is like, oh, you know what I don't know how to do is say goodbye. I just ghost, right? We'll talk a little bit. We'll talk 2 or 3 times, and then that's it, you know. But no, I'm you know, to my there are a pair of there are a few people that I am in touch with, but it sort of became as I was older, right? It was like people from high school, but it was like once I was kind of like, you know, I left home for my last year of high school, so I graduated at 17, but I left home at 16, and like they're friends from that time that I made. It sort of feels like once I stopped moving around all the time, sort of held on to some people and would still remain close, but like everything else is just kind of gone. It's been interesting. You know, I'm not the most social of social media people, but I've kind of gotten in touch with a few people that way, which is kind of delightful and surprising and nice and really, really lovely. But yeah, no, it was just every couple of years, everything started over again.
So I'm starting to see the seeds that then become psychotherapy later. You're like, you're not attached to people. No one's really talking about stuff at home. And you're kind of just like going inwards. Are you able to conceptualize what's going on? Or is this that you are in I retreated into like a little fantasy land in my head when I was younger. And again, normal childhood, there's nothing wrong you know, with anything. It's just that I'm not like escaping like trauma or something like that. I'm just like, I don't know what's going on.
Oh man, you gotta get into disassociation. It's the best. You gotta check it out. It's great. Yeah, no, I was dissociative and all this kind of stuff. I had no grammar. I had no language. I didn't know that it wasn't the way everybody was. You know? So no, I think part of therapy was that. Like I started therapy and was like, I would like, oh, you want to hear a funny story? And there would never be any laughter. And I was like, oh, wow, that story kills. Why aren't you laughing at that story? And it's like, it's not funny. You know, like, oh shit. Okay. You know, like I didn't know that I was dissociative. I thought I was dumb. You know, and then it was like, oh, I'm not really in my body right now. Okay, right? Like I don't have operative short-term memory. Oh, okay, interesting. All right, that explains a lot. You know, it's really something to be like 43 and realize, oh wait, I'm not stupid. I I've got these things, right? It's like discovering you're dyslexic as a middle ager. Like, oh, it's not that I can't read. It's like I'm dyslexic. There's something like that, but more psychological in scale.
During your childhood, did you ever have an ambition to do anything? I don't just mean like write or create comics, but I just mean like anything. Was there a thing that you wanted to do?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you mean like as a profession, or what do you?
Yeah, as a profession, just like when you thought about well, I guess first of all, did you think about adulthood? Did you think about what your future would be at all, or were you really like when you say dissociating? Were you really that? Apart from your body, where you didn't even think about that stuff?
No, I mean, I think I didn't think about that stuff much. I think part of it was to like just not thinking I was going to make it, some bad habits early, right? But then kind of that's the thing is like a gift of sobriety is realizing like it's a marathon now, not a sprint, and like, oh, right. Oh shit. Okay. But no, I mean, I knew I knew I wasn't able to, I had to figure something out creatively because I'm not equipped to do anything else, so I knew whatever my career path was, it was not going to be a straight line, and I was gonna have to figure something out. And yeah, it was always something creative. It was always, always tried to tell stories. I think I was trying to process things, on paper.
Was there a point where you made like an existential decision though, that's what you wanted to do? Or did you kind of float into it?
No, it was always that. I mean, I think there was probably a point where I realized I was incapable of doing the that being an astronaut or a pilot would require. Other than that, I was like, all right, well, this is the thing,
You topped out at calculus. You were like, I'm not interested.
Dude, I didn't even make it past geometry. It was a whole thing. Like I had to get special. There's a whole thing. Like I didn't take the requirements to graduate, or I took the stuff to graduate high school, but not to then enter college. And I had to get a whole special, like from the governor's office. Like I had to basically petition the state of North Carolina to make an exception for me, which they did.
Why you, I guess?
I was at an arts because I went to this is as part of the state charter of North Carolina where I graduated high school. There is a state funded school of the arts and there's a state funded school of science and math. I was at the School of the Arts, and basically it was like if you were going to enter the college system, you had to have these requirements. Otherwise, if you just graduate high school, there were two different sets of requirements, and I had the kind of minimum to graduate high school, but didn't have the collegiate math requirements. And I was in an art school, and basically it required the chancellor and my dean and the department head to basically write letters and saying like, this is not a kid who's going to work in a bank. Like he is he's at this art school, this is his work and we believe in him, and that sort of, it was really amazing. But no, it was a whole thing when it was like, oh shit, I really should have tried to. Also, I know I would have failed that class. That's the other thing too, is like I would not have succeeded in algebra 2, So
by the way, geometry is bullshit. No,
I love geometry. No. Geometry is great.
No, it's visualizing. It's
great. It's storytelling. It's storytelling. Geometry is the only math class I ever did well in.
Really, I hated proof so much.
Loved it. And I super loved it. But that was it, because it was the only one I could do. It was storytelling. I could understand it.
So wait, like when you were younger, do you think there was something about storytelling that it fit your brain naturally? Like, because if you like excel at the one form of math that does kind of fall into storytelling, what was it about you when you were younger that somehow like fit with how you thought?
I think I'm going to sound nuts if I say it, but I'll say it. I think there was something about taking time and flattening it out onto a plane where I could control it, where I could navigate through space and time in a way I understood and could define and could accelerate. I think there's a reason. I think I have a certain facility for comics, and I think it's because it's how I need to think about things. I think it's like knowing how to speak Spanish and getting by then with pidgin Italian. There's enough similarities and other things, but like I think comics are just, I don't know how I have a synesthetic experience, I hear shapes and feel the shapes of things, and I can feel a tempo in my chest. A lot of stuff that I start off with, I need to, Sex Criminals again as an example. We did this 8-panel grid, and when I was developing what the book would be, I was just trying to figure out how that grid worked and all the different iterations of what it would look like, and just have pages and pages of notebooks where I'm drawing rectangles. And I think, my wife thought I was going crazy. And I was like, I'm trying to figure out my new book, and it's just rectangles. It looked like as though I were trying to recreate the I Ching or something, But I was looking for the tempo. I was trying to figure out how to hear and feel the tempo and the timing. And since there's so much of it was comedy, that was all about timing. And I was like, oh, I can work, and then discovering an 8-panel grid is kind of two measures of 4/4 time, which is sort of the default pop music tempo. And okay, I can hear that. And I can, suddenly I was I don't know. It's a very synesthetic thing. I still struggle to figure out how to articulate, but there's something about comics that I think I have a leg up with the language, because I can feel it in a way that I don't know that I don't think you're supposed to feel things that you read physically. But I do, it's like tasting colors or hearing shapes, but there's a thing that there's a synesthetic response I have to the organizing principles of comics.
But you mean it metaphorically, right?
No,
you don't literally.
No, you literally mean that it's synesthetic for you?
Yes. So I think that's part of where that facility comes from, or whatever I think is a facility. If I'm good at it, it's because of that.
Yeah.
I think it's why I was drawn to the medium. I loved film, and I always loved movies. But then when I started editing, I discovered an entire new love of it. And that was, cutting 16 millimeter film and 8 millimeter film with razor blades and tape, counting frames and stuff like that. It was like, oh, okay, this is it. Now I've got time to play with. I'm really getting to sculpt with time, and that was cool.
Can you feel that same rhythm in TV writing, or how does it manifest in you because I've only written one comic script ever, so I can feel on the page, especially because I mostly write comedy, so I can feel the kind of the air, the movement of the air. Does that make sense on a page?
Sure. I think that's been something I've been really learning, and sort of the difference between the first thing I had made to this was the biggest takeaway from the first thing I ever had written that got turned into television was realizing all the stuff that writers do to I'm going to change the margins a little bit, and I'm going to do that, and it's this, and I'm going to get rid of all the scene description, and it's all right, I know I got my script down to 54 pages, but when I read it, it's 66 minutes long, but it's only 54 on the page, so get away with it. You don't. That's not how time works, right? So that's been kind of a learning. That's been cool to kind of see and feel. I think from a more 30,000 foot, I can look at the big moves of a thing and sense, oh wait, this is out of balance. I'm gonna want this here, or you know what I mean? There's a kind of sculptural thing to this structure that I think translates, but that's from a almost abstract, kind of thing.
I'm almost more interested though in the bodily part of it, because that is really fascinating. I think that, at least for me, I don't know about for you, but I was not very self-aware as a kid. And so the bodily feeling that you say that you had, in the terms of storytelling, I don't think I gained that until both I started performing as an adult, doing comedy, performing it, at UCB and stuff like that. And then through therapy, my writing after starting therapy is so markedly, so drastically different. And I mean, so much better, but it was that process that allowed me to reconnect with my body and feel this stuff.
Right. It's interesting. My son is clinically anxious, and the only time his shoulders drop, he does improv, and it's before he goes on stage, and you'll see him before, and then the show starts, and his arms drop, and he goes out, and he's great at it. He's really funny, but he's also like, he's listening. He's the one who'll always kind of weave he always gets the callback jokes, because he'll be the one to tie the things together, but like, he's just so present in the moment. So that makes sense. Like I've seen examples of that. Yeah, it's kind of, it's, you ever, when you take two magnets and put the positive ends together and you feel the magnetic fields crushing against that? Yeah. It's like that. I'm not really feeling something that's there. It's like I'm feeling the negative space between moments, and that suggests what the positive space is. And it's a very kind of thing. So I don't know how else to describe it. But I could understand how having to actually live in the moment and create the moment in real time for someone else out loud would be that from another direction, So that tracks is interesting for me. But,
was there something about stories when you were younger that you could lose yourself in them?
Oh, sure.
This is
yeah, no, 100%.
This is so basic.
Yeah, but no, like my parents said the worst thing in the world they could do was send me to my room. It was all I wanted. It was all, when I had to be punished, I would like sit in the corner and stare at the wall, right? Because there was all I wanted to do was escape. So no, 100%. Whether it was entertaining and whatever it was, but yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then I think too, being, awkward and always new, there was the cultural currency of movies and TV that could provide small talk, So there was that going for it too. It's like but yeah, no, 100%, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you're a teenager in the late '80s, right?
90s, early 90s.
Early 90s. What is it in pop culture, or not necessarily pop culture, like whatever subculture you are part of, that is exciting your mind at that point?
A film, for sure. It was always film, and comics were getting really interesting then too. They sort of from the early 80s were getting interesting and experimental, and there was kind of really good work happening then too. And music, as a big music, am still a big music person. But it's the thing of, I was always curious about who made the things I love and what did they love. I was a huge Queen fan, but I got there through Nine Inch Nails. And then from Queen comes Bowie, and from Bowie comes Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of kind of that archaeology involved. But also just being weird and like not fitting in, I love and still love the Coen Brothers and David Lynch, and like art movies and weird shit was always my thing. It was, I think part of it is having like that sort of, whether it's any kind of gift or just a sort of boon of watching a million things. I always knew, always knew where things were going. I could always tell, I would like, oh, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and that guy will do this, and the thing it brought up, and that's that, and yada. I was always kind of able to get to the end of the story fast. So like any kind of personal idiosyncratic narrative and storytelling was great, because I couldn't tell where it was going. No one's critique of Eraserhead was, oh, you knew where it was going the whole time.
Right. I was gonna say like Twin Peaks, like you had no idea what was going to happen, like where that Laura Palmer's dad was inhabited by an evil spirit from the black.
That old story. But like I remember, like at Twin Peaks is a perfect example. Like what a huge like crease in the tablecloth that was. But like realizing that Twin Peaks, like the story worked on a lunar cycle. Whenever there was a full moon, you were going to the Black Lodge. And I remember charting on my calendar when episodes aired and what the Black Lodge episodes were going to be. because of where the moon was going. And like just that feeling, like I don't know that that means anything. I don't know that that provides any understanding to the greater narrative serial concerns of Twin Peaks, but it's there and it's fucking cool. And to be like 14 and to puzzle that out and realize all those shots of the moon are there for a reason. It's not just to say it's night. It's to let you know the clock is ticking and Bob's coming in 4 episodes, right? Like that was such a thing for me. And like, or even, you know, I loved Star Wars, and I remember like pausing things that were the best example I think of this is like when like Darth Vader throws the Emperor down the tube at the end of Return of the Jedi, as he picks the Emperor up and the Emperor's lightning is going through Vader, like there would be these flashes of all the cybernetics and all the robot stuff. And I remember like pausing as to see and realizing like that's there for like 2 frames. There's 3. Someone had to design this entire servo arm mechanism for how Darth Vader's fucking shoulder works that's visible for 2 frames of film. That guy knew it was there. And that's it. If you got it, great. And if just that joy of unpacking all that kind of stuff, you know, like that just occupied me endlessly.
It is interesting. You're talking about a time period. I remember that it was very like, I don't have a good word for it. I'll call it breadcrumby. But like you would have a piece, there would be a piece of art, music or something like that. I saw Superchunk at Lollapalooza 95 and bought incidental music where they do a cover of the Magnetic Fields. And then that led me to the Magnetic Fields. And then that leads you to something else. And that leads you to whatever, right? And it's all like breadcrumbing down. And you are almost like we're slightly 2 different generations, but like both lived in the same time period enough where you become investigators. If you are that interested, and this is where you are finding your identity, because this is definitely where like I found my identity in this stuff.
Yeah. You know, it like it's great to have the sum total of, you know, human knowledge in your pants all the time. But like, you know, I remember hearing about a Pixies bootleg of a show where they only did Prince songs. And I love the Pixies and I love Prince, and that became my holy grail. And I searched this country up and down for this Pixies show where for whatever reason they just did Prince covers. And I finally find it at this record shop in Chicago, and I can't believe it. And like I run home and I put it in, and it's just a Pixies show, right? It's just a regular, it's great. I mean, it's a live Pixies, but it's just them. And go back to the record store, which is like, oh, this is fine, but it's not this. And realized that the guy making the bootlegs, that alphabetically Prince came after Pixies, and there was a fuck up in the manufacturing. So he had a bootleg Prince show. And the set list of that show got put into the Pixies, right? So the thing I was looking for existed, but not how I wanted it to. But just the joy, like that was like 2 years, 3 years, right? That took forever. And now that you could just Google that in like 2 seconds, you're like, oh, what did they do last night? Oh, yeah, okay, right. The joy of the hunt was a big part of it, right? Having to track all that stuff down.
Oh, yeah. I remember there were Pavement B-sides that I found that I had to find on a website. And then in physics class, because physics class had one of the only computers hooked up to the internet. And then I would download a WAV file of a Pavement B-side and put it on a 3.5-inch floppy disk just to listen to one song. And that made my identity. And then you have to decouple in adulthood. You have to decouple the pop culture or indie culture investigator and this stuff being so important from who your identity is if you were going to progress as a person. Or at least that had to happen for me.
Yeah, no, totally. Right. Otherwise you turn into you just turn into your Jack Black and High Fidelity, right?
Exactly. Okay, the internet started to fall apart. So we can start wrapping up.
Okay.
So that it's not like 10 glitchy pauses in between every sentence.
All good.
But there's a couple things I'm still curious about. I'm wondering, like, when you got sober, and we don't have to get into like any of the details.
We've gone this far. Why stop?
But like, I'm curious about your creative process through sobriety and through the journey, you know, of like letting go and letting God.
Well, like you know, it's tricky to, you know, I'm not a I've no religion, so that was part of the navigation. But also, I went to it at a point where I didn't care if it meant I wasn't going to write again. I wanted to live more than I wanted to write. You know, I was at that kind of state of like, all right, if this is what the choice is between living and drinking yourself to death, but being a writer, I would take living. I mean, that's kind of the thing. But I am one of those people. I don't think that. Like, I think if Van Gogh had access to SSRIs, we would have 300 more Van Gogh paintings. I don't think we would have 0 Van Gogh paintings. Right? I think if Picasso had access to healthcare, I think Paloma Picasso wouldn't have had cigarettes put out on her. Right? I don't think that there's a connection between. I never experienced it in a meaningful way. I mean, drugs could keep me awake. That was about what it contributed, but that is a ever diminishing fucking returns. So, you know, it wasn't a question of, what if I never write again? It was like, I'm not going to live. So that was no kind of bargain at all, right? That was an easy choice to make. And much like therapy, it became a thing that was only strengthened, I think, through sobriety. Being sober and giving myself over to that process was made me a better writer, made me a more creative person because I was sober.
Was there a specific thing you noticed change? Like, were you more, I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out. This is not anything that has to actually do with the journey of sobriety, but like where you could write more emotional characters or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Writing was another form of self-medicating. And then it stopped being that and started being something truly creative. It wasn't like I have to do something to change my brain chemistry. It was, this is what I do and I love to do it. You know, it was a very holistic kind of change. It wasn't like, oh, I could never write this or I could never write that. It was always like, oh no, all those kind of elevated states of consciousness were about altering brain chemistry by any means necessary. If anything else, I became better because I wasn't fucked up all the time and I was more productive. You know, it's hard to write when you're hungover. You know, I could just get shit done better and more reliably. And you know, just very, from a very mercenary point of view, from a very mercenary practical point of view. Like, no, I hit way more deadlines once I got clean.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't trying to get fucking high all the time. Because that always comes first, right? That always comes first.
Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining me on this journey, even with the terrible internet. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. I love these kind of conversations. Thanks for having me. Bio, 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 bio.